Welcome back to our new show, Politics Unusual. I'm Morgan McKay. We're taking a deep dive into political issues that are important to you at home. Our first guest today will be New York City Emergency Management Commissioner Zach Iscol. Then we'll speak to Andrew Rein from the Citizens Budget Commission to talk about the very late state budgets. Then we'll check in on the New Jersey governor's race. But first, could New York City move to have an open primary system? That is one of several election reforms that the New York City Charter Revision Commission is reportedly considering this year. And do you remember Peanut the squirrel? Well, his death is now sparking new legislation in New York. Peanut was rescued by an upstate man and lived with him for 7 years before the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation seized the squirrel and euthanized him, they say in order to test the animal for rabies. This new bill would require a 72-hour waiting period before animals from animal sanctuaries are euthanized. But joining us today is Emergency Management Commissioner Zach Iscol. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. Congratulations on the new show. Excited to be on with you and excited to be watching this on Friday nights.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to start first off with the horrific helicopter crash yesterday that ended up killing 6 people. Our hearts go out to their families and friends. You know, your team did such incredible work as well yesterday dealing with all of that. But I wanted to talk about, you know, what's next, you know, in terms of legislation. And do you think this should lead to more reforms or regulations over the tourist industry when it comes to helicopters?
I mean, so first off, like you said, my heart goes out to the families who lost their loved ones, the family of the pilot, that family of 5. It really is tragic and it's awful. And a huge credit to the first responders who were on the scene immediately. I mean, the work that they did last night or yesterday afternoon was really incredible. And so right now what's happening is we transitioned from rescue and recovery operations, and now the investigation is taking place. So last night, our team was working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Coast Guard, National Transportation Safety Board, the FBI, local law enforcement in New Jersey to get the helicopter out of the Hudson. They moved it to facility, and they're going to do the investigation now. And I think it's premature to get ahead of that investigation. We need to see what went wrong. Were there mechanical failures? Was it, you know, some other types of errors? Let's let the investigation run its course, and then from there we can figure out what the recommendations are to make sure this doesn't happen in the future.
Switching gears a little bit, you've been ringing alarm bells for a while now about federal funding and the impact it could have here in the city. And one of the things that you have mentioned is how emergency management relies upon about $110 million in federal grants. That includes about 160 jobs, or 2/3 of the agency's headcount. How concerned are you about some possible future funding cuts?
So our funding from the city, it's about $25 million for my agency in particular, but 2/3 of my agency is federally funded. And that is in the wake of 9/11. The federal government set up a program to fund emergency management agencies across the country, largely in response to acts of terrorism. But there are now cuts that are happening across the board to federal agencies, to budget, to personnel, to major programs. And those impacts are pretty significant. So we launched a 90-day review a couple weeks ago. We have some amazing folks that are participating in it, real national leaders, city leaders, where we're looking at the gaps that are being created by these changes at the federal level, and then how we at the local level can creatively fill them. But it's going to be very, very hard. I mean, we really rely on our federal partners, as we did last night, right? Last night, this helicopter crash, we have the FBI, U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We really need these federal partners in times of emergencies.
Now, even more immediately, the Trump administration is already making some cuts to your guys' funding, and that includes about $325 million that was meant for flood mitigation. And there's several projects, too, that are going to be impacted from this. Help explain a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think we should take a step back and explain what this program is. So in 2018, the Trump administration, actually with bipartisan support of Congress, started something called BRIC, which is Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. And it's the only federal program, and it's one of the best things to come out of the first Trump administration. It's one of the only federal programs that invests in infrastructure, mitigation, resilience to help us prepare for emergencies. You know, as an emergency manager, I really believe the best emergency is one that doesn't happen, or it's one that you're prepared for. And these dollars help us identify hazards around the country, not just in New York City, right? So they use it in California for fire mitigation, on the Gulf Coast for hurricane mitigation. A lot of states use it to take power lines and move them underground so they're not susceptible to high winds and to keep the electricity going. And in the city, we're using it primarily for floods, coastal floods, stormwater flooding. We have a great program up at Hudson Point where a lot of the city's food comes in to make that resilient. So these dollars are critical to help us prepare, and the program was just cut by Department of Homeland Security.
So what's next for you guys in terms of that program?
So we are now working very closely with OMB to identify some of these projects are major infrastructure projects, right? Increasing, our sewer capacity for floodwater, building coastal resiliency. So we're now doing an analysis of all of the projects that are affected by this lack of funding or these funding cuts. Some of these projects are already underway, and we're then looking at which are some of the programs that might just have to go on the back shelf. Which some of these programs maybe we find other capital dollars for, which ones we maybe lobby to the state for funding. So we got to figure out how to fill those gaps right now because it really is critically important.
And state lawmakers right now are struggling to try to grapple with maybe what's next a little bit. Senate Majority Leader Andre Stewart-Cousins just spoke the other day, and we're going to play a soundbite here, and I'll have you respond.
Dark clouds loom, but look at the stock market. For 3 days it's down, now it's up. So it's extremely hard to know exactly what we are dealing with. So I think we are dealing with the realities that we have in front of us.
So Senate Majority Leader Andre Stewart-Cousins, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, Governor Kathy Hochul, they've all kind of said some similar things, that it's hard right now to determine exactly where some of these funding cuts are going to be. So it's hard to prepare for them. Do you agree with that?
It's very hard, right? We don't know what is, it's very hard to plan when you don't know what to plan around. I will say one of the things about this mitigation funding is it's great business. We know that every dollar you spend in mitigation, resilience, and preparing saves you at a minimum $6 later on, maybe even as much as $12. So that $300 million, that could cost us $1.8 billion. It will cost us $1.8 billion down the line. So it's better to pay for it now, make these investments now in order to safeguard us in the future.
Exactly. Now, one other thing, back last fall, there were rumors that you were considering possibly leaving your office when there was some of the scandals going on in Mayor Eric Adams' office. Now, you stayed, but are you plan to endorse in this mayoral race?
I am in an apolitical position. It is great. I get to stay out of this mayoral race. So no, I don't. As a city commissioner, we don't do endorsements. We stay out of local politics. I'm very proud to be working for this mayor, for this administration. I think there's a lot more we have to do. And certainly, we are in a moment of crisis, right? And there's a lot that my team has on its plate. And we're looking forward to serving New Yorkers and during this time.
And you guys have done such incredible work. Is there anything, though, that you're looking forward to? Are you looking at maybe running for mayor yourself one day?
I am looking forward to spending time with my kids, right? To seeing, that's the thing. For me, I have two things that I do. I spend time with my kids. I spend time with the amazing men and women I work with at New York City Emergency Management. And that's a pretty good life where you get to serve New Yorkers and also, get home to tubby time every once in a while.
Exactly. Perfect. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah,
awesome.
And congrats again.
Thank you. Now, next, the New York State budget is almost 2 weeks late and lawmakers are frustrated. Coming up, we'll be joined by the president of the Citizens Budget Commission to break down how the state wants to actually spend your tax dollars. Welcome back to Politics Unusual. New York State budget negotiations are at a standstill, and state lawmakers once again went home for the weekend. So joining us now is our next guest, Andrew Rein from the Citizens Budget Commission, a nonpartisan think tank. You are our numbers guy, strictly numbers. But I am going to get your take on something a little outside of numbers, but still in your wheelhouse here. So Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie introduced a bill over the week, and this has to do with policy because, as you know, budgets being late, that's nothing new up in Albany. But, you know, having policy in the budget, it really sort of drags down the budget process, slows it down. And so Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie says that as long as there is policy in the budget, state lawmakers could still get paid. And that was a bill that he introduced. Now, that's kind of one of the reasons why budget negotiations continue, is because state lawmakers don't get paid right now. But what's your take on this?
So we're 11 days late. We have the federal cuts, the looming federal cuts staring us down, an increasing chance of a recession, a crumbling MTA, and yes, we have a late budget because we're talking about policy. It does, bounding up policy in the budget does both of them short shrift. You don't get enough about budget making and you don't get enough about policy making. These are all important. Separating them would be better. But frankly, over the last 15 years, long before any of these three leaders were in their job, more and more policy got into the budget process till we got to this culture where you can't make big decisions without the cudgel of a budget decision hanging over your head. So there's finger pointing all the time. And it's actually understandable to, when you have big policy issues, to band in the budget, because that's how things are done. But we need to unwind it. Instead of finger pointing at each other, let's point to the future. And the governor, the speaker, and the majority leader get together and say, we can actually make hard decisions without the budget involved.
Yes, I know. And governors have the most power during the budget process because of that sort of loophole. But turning to numbers now, the MTA now is $30 billion short when it comes to funding. And, you know, a lot of people I think sitting at home are saying, wait, $30 billion are short of because we just paid for congestion pricing. And I know, and you know, that that is earmarked for certain projects, that money from congestion pricing. But this $30 billion budget hole, state lawmakers are considering possibly a payroll tax increase. What are you guys suggesting that lawmakers sort of look at when it comes to this?
There's no question that the MTA needs massive investment in its infrastructure. Right now, it's falling back. We might be having more summers of hell. We're going to have to keep explaining to our boss why we're late for work because the train was delayed. We need massive investment. But we also need everyone who benefits to share in that. Riders, drivers, taxpayers, and frankly, labor has the benefit of those jobs and the benefit of having a stable MTA. So we all need to get together and fund it. But we have to pair that funding, we have to spread it fairly and pair it with an accountability program so that everyone knows that their money is being spent wisely, is on the right stuff, which is getting the system to a state of good repair and keeping it there. Not necessarily nice to do things, but essential to do things so we can get to work. And then making sure that that question is finally answered. Why is it so expensive to build MTA stuff? It costs more than any place else, but let's lay to rest. Where could managerial improvements help? And where is just how New York is? We need to do that. So we need to fund the MTA, but we need to fund it fairly. If you keep putting it just on certain businesses, we are going to hurt New York's competitiveness. We are in a competition with other places for residents and businesses. So we have to figure out how to fund the MTA in a way that keeps us competitive. So you have to share the burden. So as they talk about that, make sure it's regional and make sure taxpayers, riders, and drivers all contribute. That would be the best way to improve the system and be fair.
I think a lot of people see the MTA's budget purse as sort of a black hole. So where do you think accountability comes from, or how does that work?
You know, the MTA produces reams of data. They actually do. They have a lot there. It's not always understandable as to a regular layperson, but maybe to my staff. But we need to have project plans that are identified. Annual updates simply on those capital projects. Is it getting done? Isn't getting done? Are we making progress? Is the system crumbling more, or are we actually catching up? And finally, that study, that independent study to say, why does it cost so much? And from that study, we can learn what the MTA is doing right, maybe what it's doing wrong and how to fix it, but also the public trust. They have to believe their money is spent wisely or what they'll do. And frankly, there are plenty of people who say, why give the MTA money? Well, we have to actually give it money if we're going to get to work on time and if our economy is going to be growing and if our quality of life is going to be decent. But we have to hold them accountable for real delivery of good projects on time, under budget.
Yes, and so looking another issue that you guys have raised in the past, this is the spending $1 billion on loosely defined climate projects. That's something your group has highlighted, and that's because the state hasn't spent the $2 billion already set aside for the Environmental Bond Act.
I mean, let's think about this. The governor went to the people of New York and said, vote for my bond act, $4 billion to invest in the environment. And the people overwhelmingly said yes. We still have $2 billion that's not spent. Let's spend those $2 billion without figuring out the next $1 billion. I mean, we literally, if we step back, we're talking about this $1 billion here. We're talking about tax rebates when we have federal cuts staring us down. We've seen the tip of the iceberg, and we're looking and kind of potentially saying, oh, well, we'll deal with that later. When you see the tip of the iceberg, you start to change course. That's what they need to be focused on.
Well, hopefully they're listening to you up in Albany. Thank you so much, Andrew. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Now, coming up next, still to come, we're shifting our focus to New Jersey and the race for governor. Also, the plane scare this week involving members of Congress from New Jersey and New York. Welcome back to Politics Unusual. At least 6 members of Congress from New Jersey and New York were on a plane headed to JFK this week when they were struck by another plane while on the runway at Ronald Reagan International Airport. Long Island Congressman Nick LaLota posting this picture from inside the plane. According to the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority, the wingtip of one American Airlines plane struck the wingtip of another American Airlines plane. There were no injuries and both planes have been taken out of service for inspection. But this accident is raising new concerns about airline safety. In January, an Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with an American Airlines regional jet that was preparing to land at this same airport. New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer, who is running for governor, says hopefully members will now prioritize funding for the Federal Aviation Administration.
There were a bunch of members members of Congress on that airplane. I'll tell you, if anything, hopefully this will redouble everyone's efforts to make sure we get answers, not just what happened at the American flight in Washington, but to make sure that the staffing levels and what we need to invest smartly at these airports for the FAA and air traffic controllers, that they get what they need. Because to me, you don't cut it close when it comes to people's safety.
Congressman Gottheimer is one of 6 candidates running in the New Jersey's Democratic gubernatorial primary election. Also running is Newark Mayor Ross Baraka, Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, former State Senate President Steve Sweeney, and former Montclair Mayor Sean Spiller. There are also 5 candidates running in the Republican primary for New Jersey governor. And with such a packed field of candidates, this election cycle is drawing a huge increase in the number of donors to the New Jersey governor's race. State election law officials said this week that there has been a 374% increase in the number of people contributing to gubernatorial candidates participating in New Jersey's public financing program. Next up, we're going to be testing your knowledge of the tri-state region, so stay with us as we take a look at some political history. Flashing to the past, welcome back to Politics Unusual. This week in history, on April 4th, 1973, the World Trade Center's Twin Towers officially opened in New York City. At the time, they were the tallest buildings in the world, standing at 1,368 feet each. The opening marked a pivotal moment for New York City, symbolizing its economic dominance before the terrorist attack on September 11th, 2001. More than 2,750 people were killed in the terrorist attack that day, a day that lives on in history and in our hearts. Finally, tonight, it's time to test your knowledge. Last week, we asked you, in 1884, what was paraded across a Brooklyn bridge to demonstrate its stability? The answer, 21 elephants and several camels. Showman P.T. Barnum proposed a stunt to prove the bridge was safe and would not collapse. Now, to this week's question. What was the original color of New York City's yellow taxi cabs? Don't Google the answer, but if you know it or want to take a shot at it, go ahead and scan the code on your screen. That's going to take you to our website, fox5ny.com, where you can type in your answer, then check back here to see if you're right. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Politics Unusual. I'm Morgan McKay. We look forward to having you back here next week.